need a crown on a root canal tooth? Let's find out. All right, guys, good morning. It's February 12th, 2025, 5:45 in the morning, a Wednesday, which is rare. Normally I record these podcasts Saturday morning, but it just worked out Wednesday. My kids get up for school at 6:30, so I have 45 minutes to answer the question, do you need a crown on a root canal tooth? Kind of a nuanced question, but one thing I do want to bring up, if you watch the video podcast and not just the audio podcast, I got a lot of questions recently about why do I wear orange glasses for my podcast, yellow glasses for my TikTok videos, and light yellow glasses when I work. Real quick, there's something called circadian biology, and you have an internal clock in your body, and your internal clock, the more closely it is aligned to the internal clock of, we'll just say the sun, the healthier you are. And a lot of things will throw this internal clock off. Light is one of them. So the orange glasses block blue and green light because those lights tell your brain it's time to get up. But we're not really designed to get up before the sun gets up. The yellow glasses only block blue light because you don't need to block green light during the day. So the different colors of glasses will block different shades of light that seem to disrupt your circadian clock or your circadian rhythm. So that's why I wear these glasses. Okay. Look at the screen now. Unless you're driving, then just follow along. I'm going to go over through a case where a patient presented with a root canal tooth because of a couple issues, time, finance, philosophies, a couple issues. She could not do a crown. So we had to progress with a resin composite. And I'm going to run through some logic and some research and explain to you if you need a crown on a root canal tooth. One of the reasons why my podcasts aren't just 3-minute long podcasts that answer a question is I want you to have the ability to listen to your dentist or listen to your doctor, to ask them questions about your treatment, and then to be able to logically follow their answers. So no longer do I want your doctor or your dentist or your financial advisor or anyone in your life to be your sole unquestioned authority. I want you to go to authority for guidance and advice, but I also want to arm you with logic and reasoning and critical thinking skills that allow you to question authority so you can make the best decision for yourself. Okay, so here's a patient. If you look at the screen, big cavity on this tooth, cracked existing filling on the tooth, and now he or she needs this fixed. Okay, if you go through these photos, here's photo 1. Photo 2, you can kind of see as I further progress into this that the gums are involved, the gums are bloody. And this right here, if you're looking at the screen, this is kind of a picture of what's called immediate dentin sealing, where I sealed up the dentin and I haven't sealed up or restored the rest of the tooth yet. This tooth, I was actually unable to use a rubber dam, which is rare for biomimetics, because the decay and defects were so deep under the gums that the rubber dam would have impaired my ability to seal the margin. Third photo, you can see how we're slowly fixing and polishing his tooth back up. And fourth photo, tooth is fully restored. It's beautiful, but there's no crown on this tooth. And I'll just say right out the gate, although this is the best biomimetic filling I could do, it's sealed up, the occlusion's spot on, it's polished, it's contoured, the tooth looks great. I would contest, and the patient was fully aware of this, that this beautiful filling is temporary. Because if you get a root canal on a tooth, long term, you need a crown or Obama met a crown. And I'm going to run through all of the logic and research here for you to help you make a decision, to help you understand that. So let's go to the first article, which is a meta-analysis done in 2015. And they looked at a bunch of research. And they did comparisons between teeth that had root canals that just had fillings and teeth that had root canals that had crowns. And this paper is very disappointing because after all of their research, I'll take you down here. It says author's conclusions. There is insufficient evidence to assess the effect of the effect of crowns compared to conventional fillings for the restoration of root-filled teeth. That means root canal teeth. Until more evidence becomes available, clinicians should continue to base decisions about how to restore root-filled teeth on their own clinical experience, while taking into consideration the individual circumstances and preferences of their patient. Let me take a sip of my espresso. What this means is we looked at a bunch of things. We don't know what's better. But if you come down further, there is some inclination that crowns long-term on root canal teeth are better than resin fillings. But they also state that the evidence produced from one study concluded that none of the 117 root-filled premolars experienced a catastrophic failure after 3 years. Although only 104 teeth were included in the final 3-year assessment, the study concluded there was no difference between treatments for the risk of non-catastrophic failure. There was no evidence available for any of our secondary outcomes, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what this study is saying is basically a bunch of premolars, which are the teeth in front of your molars, were studied over a 3-year period where they all had root canals, and some of them had crowns, some of them had fillings, and after 3 years, there was not a huge difference in the outcomes. But there are some shortcomings of this study. First, it was only 3 years. If you're going to spend a bunch of money on a root canal and a bunch of money on a crown, you want to know past 3 years what the success rate would be. It only showed premolar teeth. And more than common than not, you're going to have your molars root canaled, your molars possibly crowned. So it didn't even show the molars. And if you were watching the video podcast of this, in the beginning, the patient that presented was a molar. Although there were no catastrophic failures at 3-year mark, meaning no teeth had to be extracted at the 3-year mark, there were more non-catastrophic failures in the filling only than the crown only. So let's define these two terms. Catastrophic failure means, I'm sure you know this, tooth is done, cracks in half, something breaks off, it just cannot be fixed again. A non-catastrophic failure means something broke on the tooth, but you can still fix the tooth without extracting the entire tooth. So, out of the study, 53 teeth, 3 of them that were filling only hit a non-catastrophic failure, which means it had to be fixed. Out of 54 crown teeth, 1 hit a non-catastrophic failure. So, in conclusion, at the 3-year mark of crown or filling on a root canal tooth, it seems like there's not a huge difference in clinical outcomes. But nobody wants to only think 3 years out. But I want you to keep that in mind, that at the 3-year mark, there's starting to be a tiny bit of difference in long-term success between crowning a root canal tooth and filling a root canal tooth. And as you move further out 3 years, you're going to see there's even a bigger difference. So let's move to this next study where they talk about single crown versus composite for glass fiber post-retain restorations, an 8-year randomized clinical trial. If you're ever looking at research, let's say all of a sudden you become a big nerd and you're reading research, randomized clinical trials are at the top of like predictable, reliable results. So first study, 3 years out. This next study, now we're looking at 8 years out. And this is where you start to see even more of a separation between catastrophic failures and non-catastrophic failures. So right here, in conclusion, metal ceramic crowns showed a higher success rate than composite restorations. The survival rates were similar, but composite restorations had a higher need for repairs. So, remember when I said, as you progress further, there becomes a larger difference in the non-catastrophic failures. And I think I have some of the stats written down here. What did I say right here? Okay, so 27 failures in 8 years were observed in the composite group. 27 failures were observed in both the crowns and the composite. So 75 teeth were studied. And after an 8-year period, 27 of those 75 teeth either had a catastrophic failure or a non-catastrophic failure. 22 of those failures were observed in the composite resin group. So out of the 27, 81.5% of the failures were composite and 18.5% were crowns. Of the composite, 6 were non-repairable. So 27 teeth failed out of the 75. 22 were composite filling. 6 of those 22 were catastrophic failures. Now for the crowns, 5 out of the 27 failures were the crowns, and 3 were catastrophic. So you can see that there's a large difference. 27 non-catastrophic failures in fillings and only 5 non-catastrophic failures in crowns. When it comes to catastrophic, they're closer, where it's 6 of the 75 teeth studied overall, which were composites, had to be extracted. 3, which were the crowns, had to be extracted. So it's about, if you extrapolate it out over 8 years, 10 years, longer, it seems to be any statistician is going to poop their pants when I say this, but the percentage seems to be double. Your risk is double of having to extract the tooth if you don't crown the tooth compared to having crowned the tooth. I don't know if that's how the math works out, but at least at the 8-year mark, that's how the math works out. Out of 75 failed teeth, 3 of them which had crowns had to be extracted, and 6 of them which had fillings had to be extracted. So you can see as you further move away from the initial procedure, at the 3-year mark, teeth that had to be extracted were relatively similar. Actually, no teeth had to be extracted. But at the 8-year mark, double the teeth. So 6 teeth that had fillings had to be extracted, and 3 teeth that were crowns had to be extracted. And there was significantly less non-catastrophic failures in crowns. So if we just stop here, you can kind of see that these non-catastrophic failures, which are filling breaking, filling coming loose, something leaking, something not having a good outcome, significantly increased from year 3 to year 8. And maybe you're asking, is that even a big deal? What's the big deal if I have to go back in and get my filling repaired after root canal? It is a big deal. And if there's any root canal specialists listening to my podcast, this is about to be their favorite part. So in this study, success rates of root canals. This study goes through all the factors that will increase your success of a root canal. And one of the major factors of increasing the success of the root canal is the quality or the integrity of the filling or crown on the tooth. So let's say you have the best root canal, and then you go back to your dentist, and your dentist has a bad day and does a really bad filling on the tooth or a really bad crown on the tooth, then there's an increased chance that the root canal will fail. So let me see if I can find on the study here where it talks about that. the increased survival rate. Okay. Well, obviously, I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't highlight it. But the study further goes on and says that, oh, here we go. All right. We have it right here. Right here it says, some found that root canal treated teeth with restorations were, okay, so basically, right here, restorations on teeth that were poor had a 10 to 18% higher failure rate in the root canal than without it. So you have a higher rate of the root canal failing if there's a poor crown on it. And if you have an increased rate of non-catastrophic failures with fillings on root canal teeth, then logically that non-catastrophic failure in a tooth could lead to a poor outcome in the root canal. So and then that may lead to a catastrophic failure. So when there's an increased risk of non-catastrophic failure, and one of the outcomes of that is a increased risk of failed root canal, that will in turn increase the risk of a catastrophic failure. So yes, these non-catastrophic failures, although may seem minor at first, will lead to more complications of losing the tooth. And the whole goal is to keep your tooth. So there's one more thing I want to bring up, which isn't brought up in this literature, is something called the Rainy Ridge. Now, I think this is funny. There's this guy named Tim Rainey that in 1996 and then further in 1998 discovered something called a Rainy Ridge in a tooth. And this will tie everything together. But I just think it's so funny that they discovered something in a tooth. Like, this guy's brother is probably like an explorer and discovered like this new island off the coast of Africa. And he's like, oh yeah, I discovered this new thing in a tooth. And his parents are like, who cares? So what is the Rainy Ridge? Basically, in 1996, this dentist named Tim Rainey found that there is a web of enamel-like tooth structure inside the tooth. It basically holds the whole tooth together. Imagine a tree stump that is just cut off, but the whole stump is intact. And then imagine a tree stump that is cut close to the ground, but now rotten and hollow on the inside. How much easier would it be to push and break a tree stump that's hollow and rotten than push and break a tree stump that's just cut, but it's still solid? These Rainy Ridges are like the solid core of a tree stump. It holds the whole tooth together. And I've learned in my biomimetic training, when you drill away the Rainy Ridges, you severely compromise the integrity of the tooth. And this logically makes sense. If you look at why a composite filling and crown short-term kind of are the same outcome, but as you move out further to the 8-year mark and 10-year mark, you see more failures in the composite resins than crowns, is because these Rainy Ridges have been drilled away and the actual composite filling doesn't do the best job at reestablishing these Rainy Ridges and reestablishing the integrity of the tooth. So when you drill away these Rainy Ridges or this web-like structure inside a tooth, the tooth is now severely compromised. And even the best biomimetic filling can't replace these long-term. So it turns out the reason why there's less catastrophic failure in teeth with root canal that have crowns on it is because a biomimetic crown long-term is a better replacement of these Rainy Ridges than a resin composite. And depending how your teeth come together, your oral hygiene, your whole mouth setup, a composite filling will only temporarily replace these Rainy Ridges, but a crown will be a better solution to a substitution. Long term, nothing is as good as how God made your teeth, but a biomimetic crown on a root canal tooth, I think, is as close as you can get. So, in conclusion, if you go back to the first thing with my patient experience, this patient fully understands this root canal tooth one day, hopefully less than 3 years from now, will need a biomimetic crown. But for now, we did a filling based off time, finances, and everything else. But if you have a root canal tooth, now we're talking molars, premolars. Front teeth are a little different, and we can go into that later. But let's just say if you have a root canal molar tooth, in the short term, 1 or 2 years, maybe a composite resin will be okay. But once you get past the 3-year mark, the 5-year mark, the 8-year mark, I really think you're running the risk of a catastrophic failure or having to get this tooth extracted if you don't place a crown on a tooth with the root canal. So I hope this helps you. I hope you were able to follow the logic, follow the research, and kind of look at some of my clinical examples. I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.